All right, folks, let's go. We have a lot to cover. I'll start. Estimations are a very common part of consultants' jobs, and thus it's an important skill to acquire. Okay. And unfortunately here, AI does not do the job for us yet. And we need to make a lot of decisions when we are dealing with estimation cases. Okay. And why does estimation, well, help us? Because, well, estimations can help us make a quick calculation on that is low cost, low effort, right? And it's smart. And it's therefore tested in interviews. Actually, interviewers love estimations because they're easy to apply, right? You just come up with a question, one question, you don't need to memorize anything as an interviewer. And your candidate has to show communication skills. They have to listen, clarify, they have to structure it. They have to make assumptions. They have to calculate, sanity check, and conclude. So you use a lot of skills. So you test a lot of things in a candidate with an easy case. That's why estimations come often, even in final rounds. Sometimes the full final round interview is going to be an estimation, a big one, but an estimation. Okay. So I recommend you to try to master this, because if you're applying to any consulting firm and other companies as well, this has a relevant chance to come up. So to introduce myself, I'm Flavio. I'm from Brazil. I have a business background. I studied 4 years in my bachelor, 2 years in my master's management. Right. I was lucky enough to be able to study in different countries like Brazil, Spain, Australia, Switzerland, and France. And then I started my career in consulting. I spent my first 5 years in consulting, Arthur de Little, which is the first consulting firm of the world, and McKinsey, right, which is by some standards the one with the highest reputation, right, together with Bain and BCG. Then I spent 2 years in fintech, started out learning more about startups, and I started my own company, Highbridge, about 4 or 5 years ago. And since 2018, I live in Berlin, as I already mentioned. In terms of my hobbies, I love to be around water and being active, spending time with my friends, and learning about psychology. So a quick intro about what is Highbridge in the first place. So maybe you know it, maybe you haven't heard of it until today, right? So Highbridge is your solution to get to a top consulting career, right? Competition is fierce. It's one of the most coveted careers. So only 1 to 2% of people get hired in the top consulting firms, according to the firms themselves. And therefore, you need to beat a lot of competitors, right? Including a lot of competitors who are trying to browse the web and use free resources, download case books and read stuff. But honestly, this is not cutting it anymore, right? So essentially, like, there's so many candidates using resources that are premium and coaches and so on, that is quite hard to crack it without certain level of investment. But what we do, we're the only player who invests in you. So we don't charge you anything when you come, right? It's a pay later model. So you get in, and only if you get the job, then you settle your tuition fee. Okay, so no barriers for you to join. And we have not 600s, actually. I have to update this number. We have 1,000 graduates right by now, right? And top offers all over the world, in all countries or continents that we are active. But now let's buckle up, because we need to cover our advanced estimations content. For questions, please don't hesitate to raise your hand, okay, before you unmute. I will call your name to speak, so we remain organized. And I also would like you to use the chat for questions as well, okay? Okay, estimations, they're also called guesstimations, because you're guessing a name, back of the envelope calculations, right? And they are important, as I mentioned already, in real life, because actually as a consultant, sometimes your client is going to turn to you and ask, how much money do you think is on the table for us here, right? And then you go to the whiteboard or with a white sheet, and then you estimate, you structure an approach of like, how much revenue can you make if you launch a new product, for instance, or how much cost can you save, right, if you cut down on a benefit or something that you already spending. And also, like, how much how big is a market, right? That's why estimations are often market sizing exercises, because you want to know, like, okay, how big is the pie if we enter this particular geography? For instance, your client might be a soft drink company and they want to enter, let's say, South Africa, right? And then they want to know, like, okay, how big is this market for us in billion South African rands, right? So that's a typical market entry case. And well, and they help us to get let's say a big picture very quickly to see if it's worth spending more time and effort looking at it. Because imagine you calculate, okay, the South Africa market is like 1% of what we already have today. So maybe it's not worth the organizational attention to do it. So we just, with the estimation, we just remove that possibility from our roadmap. Okay, so we can make a decision. I already said why estimations are loved and beloved by interviewers. So let's talk about how we look at estimations, right? So first, the listening and recap is when you receive the case, you play it back to confirm that you understood correctly. Then you clarify. Then you structure. You have some math to do, right? We have the assumptions. You can brainstorm, but this is already something that you do sometimes before structuring. I'm going to show you. You synthesize the case and you use your business acumen, business sense all throughout, okay? And in estimations, we use pretty much everything, except for synthesis that normally you don't have a recommendation to make. You usually just reach a number. There are 5 types of estimation cases. Let's go through them now. First one is concrete estimations, right? Physical world. Volume, what is the volume of the earth? What is this infamous one, which is how many golf balls can we put in a stadium, right? And things like that, right? To use physics, use geometry. Sometimes like how long would it take for you to read all Harry Potter books, right? And you have to make assumptions so that you get to not accurate, but educated guess. Then business estimations. Here is all about financials, right? What are the profits of a gas station? That's the typical one, right? But you can get any company and make an estimation of how much money they make, right? Or what is the valuation of a company or an asset? For instance, like a factory, like this factory, how much should I sell it for? And making investments as well, right? The third type are inventories. And inventory is what we call the population of any item, like how many people, but also how many chicken, how many keys, how many trees, and anything that you have to, or how many providers of a service, right? How many hairdressers, hair salons are there in London, okay? This is the number of suppliers. And finally, very commonly, the market sizes. There are 2 types, frequent consumption and infrequent. Frequent is, let's say, daily, weekly, monthly, things that you actually consume more than once per year, right? Normally retail items or services, haircuts, for instance, yogurt or anything like that. And infrequent are less than once per year, right? For instance, a durable consumer good like a vacuum cleaner or a house or a car, like those things, they happen to be there as well. I'll make a differentiation because there are slightly different ways to approach that, right? And to calculate that. Today, we'll see one example, but yeah, those are the 5 main or the 5 estimation types, right? That we identified: concrete, business, inventories, market sizes, frequent and infrequent. Let's get practical. First question for you is, where is the cat? Okay, I think you passed that one. So now let's go to a more challenging one. What is the sofa market size in France? Let's use that question throughout our workshop today in order to learn the steps of estimations. And my goal with you today is to give you, let's say, a footprint, a framework, how to think about estimations, right? But you will need, of course, to practice that, to get more cases, more practice, and feedback to get it really well right. Let's go. First, we'll understand the depth for the divers here today. Then we're going to listen and clarify. We're going to define our approach. There are different types of approaches to estimations. We'll structure it, make assumptions, and then math and reality check. Okay? Many candidates without any training, and maybe you until today, would start from structuring. I would give you the question, and you would say like, okay, let me start, break it down. Start from number 4, step 4. But you're gonna learn how important the previous steps are so that you don't fall into a pitfall. Okay, understanding the depth. In case interviews, estimations can appear in 2 formats. A full case that you do, like a full case means 25, 35 minutes within the hour that you have allocated with the interviewer, or a part of a case. Maybe you're doing another case interview and in the middle, something pops up. It is just a small estimations, right? So there is a difference between them. This is an example. What are the hotel revenues? Some sort of business estimation, right? If you are doing a deep estimation, it's a full case, right? It's right away the case question when you start. Then you probably can spend 2 full minutes to produce your structure. Your structure will be detailed with several layers, segmentations, and so on. You try to be more accurate because you have more time. You can go deeper, okay? And then throughout this interview, you're probably going to receive exhibits and numbers that you can use to populate your structure, right? And then at the end of this 30 minutes, you deliver the answer. However, as I said, sometimes it's a part of a case that we call a shallow estimation, right? It's embedded. So here it can be, for instance, a quick structure that you produce in under 1 minute, and it should be good enough. Normally like 2-3 levels, and your interviewer is more interested in agility, right, than depth here. Okay, as you can see, I can break down the same problem in much more detail, right, if I have more time. Takeaways: deep estimations are usually the case question and are presented right at the beginning, and then can create a more detailed structure for it. And shallow estimations appear in the middle of the case only and are clearly not the main case question. You can create a simpler structure, right? For instance, your interviewer can come to you and without using the word estimate or estimations, they can say like, how much do you think that is? And then it's like, oh, and then you have to recognize, I can use these tools to approach it, right? Okay, how much investment do you think it's needed to build the tallest building, like to bring tourists to this city, right? So it's kind of a mini estimation. And then it's like, okay, let me think about it. I can actually estimate. Would you like me to do it? Yes. Okay. And then you write down, that's more or less like the cost of the terrain, the cost of the materials, the cost of the labor, and then the cost of the building, right? In total. Is everybody still with me? Yes? Okay. Thumbs up. Okay, good. All right. I have to keep moving fast. I know you're taking notes, but I have to keep moving fast to cover everything today. So listening and clarifying, that's the first of the 7 skills. As I said, don't wait for the word estimation, right? Maybe they can say something like, do you think this will generate enough revenue? And then don't say like, yes, I think. Like a consultant would never do that. Or no, I don't think so. Also not, right? So you don't guess. You have to think, you have to structure, you have to be proper, right? It's the same way you would react to a client who asks you, what do you think? And then you don't shoot from your hip, simply like that, right? You say like, that's a very interesting question. I think we can stop and think about it, okay? Now, when you're clarifying, make sure that you understand the right definitions during the case, right? For instance, word definitions. For instance, if I tell you, if I say market size, is it production or sales? Normally it's sales, but you can confirm, right? If I tell you, I don't know, market size of car sales in the US, right? How many cars are sold, the volume, or the dollar amount? Okay, volume or value. This is also an important differentiation. If I say population, what's the population of Paris? Do you mean only permanent residents, or should I consider the tourists also? Because at any point in time, there's so many tourists in Paris that I'm sure the population is at least 10% higher than only the residents, right? What do you consider population? If I say America, well, North America, US, entire continent, what do you mean here? Okay. and so on and so forth, right? I want you to be picky with the words of estimations because sometimes it can change completely what you're doing. Second, make sure you know the expected final unit, right? I always say, if you were a pilot, would you take off with your plane? And then when you're up in the air, you would ask the ground crew, where should you land? Probably not, right? I would be a bit of a risk taker kind of pilot. So essentially, it's the same thing. When you're taking off from an estimation question, know where you want to land before you take off. Know if it's a percentage, if it's a dollar, euro, whatever currency value, or if it's volume. Know if it's month or annual value, right? And so on. Third, users and usage. Here you use your brainstorming power, right? Because let me say something like here. If I say the word keys, right? I have this estimation in my library, keys. Like, of course, the first time you hear the word keys, you think about metal keys, right? At least I understand that today in 2024, we still think that. But there are other kinds of keys, right? And there are keys for many things. If you stop to brainstorm, you're going to come up with different keys, right? Keys for real estate, right? For houses and offices, but keys for drawers, for vaults, keys for wardrobes, and so on and so forth, right? There's like, if you're talking about digital keys, like blockchain keys and so on. So all of those things are keys. And that's when you think about the different users and usages of that particular thing so that you don't miss anything big or important, okay? Another example here is like fish food, right? Food for fish, what I mean, like align the definition, food for fish. Most people will think like of pet fish, but they will not think of like, oh, you can go for these places where you just fish for leisure and then you have food. And the biggest one is actually, of course, for food production, right? Fish farms, where you probably going to spend 99% of all the food for fish. So if you just think about the pets, you are going to be completely wrong. Okay, that's it. Now let me test you. Please use the chat. Who can buy sofas? What are the users of sofas? Tell me in the chat. Come on, guys and girls. Companies, yes. Households, hotels, offices, private persons, companies, households, hotels, retail, right? Yeah, you're coming up with the same things, companies, hotels. Yeah, maybe like you can talk about sofas in public sector as well. They're not companies, right? You can talk about sofas in hospitals, right? And health facilities and so on. But I think you touched upon the 80-20, right? Offices, hotels, households, and so on. Which category, and now let's use the Pareto principle, right? 80-20, right? Which of those categories do you think represents most of the market? At least 80%. What would be your choice? Home. Yeah, I agree. Okay, you don't see a lot of, well, fun offices, they have sofas and all sorts of perks, but not very often. Okay, bottom line, it is good to show your interviewer that you can brainstorm different users and usages, and then you can prioritize, right? Do this thinking process out loud because it's really valuable and it's going to make you stand out from the crowd. Don't do it silently, and show that you're doing, like, let me first think about who is using, what are they using this for? This. For instance, you think about diapers, right? Diapers, you think about babies immediately, but it's by far not the only usage of diapers, right? You can have patients, you can have senior citizens, and that's also big and representative, okay? But then you say like, however, I think I'll focus here or here and here because I think they represent more than 80%. Right? This is thinking like a consultant, and your interviewer will appreciate that. And finally, a business model, because if you're estimating something in business, make sure you understand what the client does, right? If I ask, what's the valuation of SpaceX, right? The rocket company. You need to understand how they make money in the first place, right? How do they What do they sell? Who do they sell that for? Maybe you don't know, and it's fine. As a consultant, you're not tested on your previous knowledge. It's not knowing about everything in the economy. It's knowing what to ask. It's knowing what is missing, right? It's knowing what is logical, what makes business sense, and so on. So I always say that at Highbridge, we actually train you just like we train a large language model with a lot of data. We don't need as much data as ChatGPT for you to get it done. But what you're doing, you are training yourself in certain examples so that you can extrapolate that and create new things, right? What I call zero shot in Gen AI, but that's exactly it. So make sure you clarify what is needed for you to complete your estimation. Okay, so now let me give you information. Actually, yeah, let me give you information because of time. If you could ask, like, do we include only first-hand or also second-hand sofas, right? New sofas or reselling? Then I could tell you that it is just first-hand, right? New sofas, and the market size is the sofa sold, okay? What is the time duration? Can I assume it's annual? Then I would say yes, correct. What is the usage? I can think of residential, commercial. Do you want me to focus somewhere? I would focus on residential because I think it's more than 80%, right? Then I would say, like, let's do a residential. Only residential sofas in France. Market size, do you need revenue or volume? I would say, I don't remember, actually. I think it's revenue, yeah. I've done this case 1 year ago. Retail or, let's see here. No, sorry. Domestic market size sold in France or including exports, right? This is a bit of an edge question, but it shows that you're thinking very broadly to make sure you don't make a mistake. But I would say domestic sales. Okay. So, and someone asked here, what types of sofas? Just individual piece or grand sofas? All kinds. But the question is, from which number of seats onwards is this a sofa, right? Is it one seat sofa? Is that a sofa or just a, how do you call it? Armchair, right? So let's say 2 seats and above, right? 2, 3, 4, 5. By the way, I love big sofas. I have very big sofa here. I think I can put 10 people on my sofa. So it's very fun. Okay, let's move on. So now that you clarified, you can thank your interviewer, like, okay, Flavio, thank you so much. Everything's clear. I can start. Now, step number 3. Most people also skip this one. Super important. Define the approach, right? And here, anytime you have business inventories or market sizing, you will need to define this approach. Only concrete, that's a different bucket, okay? And it requires, it's less common, to be honest, like nowadays that people ask you about golf balls or stuff. But yeah, let's focus on the most important ones. So there are 3 approaches. First one is pure demand, right? Demand approach. It assumes that the demand is a constraint or the limiting factor. In other words, we assume that the supply will be able to catch up. If people want to buy it, there is supply for it, okay? If I ask you, what is the global peanut market? Like, if people wanted to eat 2 times as much peanut, I'm sure the supply would catch up, right? That's not the constraint here. So therefore, what does it mean for case interviews? You can estimate from the demand. What is the average consumption per person times how many people consume it, okay? That's also called top-down estimation by some. I prefer to call demand. And yeah, and that's the one, right, that we can use for a lot of consumer products, a lot of things, everything you find in a supermarket and so on. However, if you're trying to estimate something relatively small compared to the market size, right? For instance, how much bread does a bakery sell? Then it starts to be hard for you to use the demand approach, right? Because, like, how many people actually, like, what percentage of the population of a city actually frequents this or goes to this bakery, That's very dangerous, because if you make a relatively small mistake, is it 0.01% or 0.2%, you already have a huge difference, right? In this case, we use the supply approach, pure supply, right? How much does the supplier offer? And the typical breakdown here is how much they supply, potentially 100% capacity. Let's say if the bakery is working nonstop, if the Starbucks coffee is like churning out coffee and so on, times the average capacity utilization, because no business almost is at 100% capacity, right? But you can estimate by doing that. Oh, an airport can handle, like Heathrow has, I don't know, 3-4 runways, and then they can handle one flight every 5 minutes and so on. But it's not all the time busy from 6 a.m. to, I don't know, 10 p.m., right? Let's assume it's 70% or 80% busy. And then how many flights is that? Okay, this is supply. In the economy in general, by the way, things are used at 70 to 90% capacity. Okay, but you have to use your judgment. For instance, think about a coffee shop you go to often or you see often. And you can think about like, okay, what percentage of time there is a line? Because a line indicates 100% capacity, right? If there's no line, they are not at capacity. So you can kind of make an educated guess of what is their capacity utilization. Okay. Now, what if I need to estimate the number of suppliers of something? For instance, like how many flights do I need? Let's say in a city like São Paulo in Brazil, or how many hair salons are there in Mumbai, right? How do I do it? I can combine both approaches, right? I can estimate how much does the population consume, right? For instance, how many haircuts do we need in São Paulo, right? Given people's typical behavior, divided by how much one supplier can offer. And this will give me the estimation of how many suppliers I have. Not only for businesses like hair salons or bakeries or whatever, but also for airports, for, let's say, any professional service, right, that you're thinking about, and so on and so forth. And even, for instance, a train, if you want to like check how many trains do you need from A to B, you're probably going to have to estimate the demand and the supply of a train, divide it and find it. Okay. So to take away, use the demand approach for any market size that you can assume the supply to catch up with the demand. Use the number of suppliers for estimating inventories, and use supply approach for estimating revenues, costs, and profits of a company. Let's practice. Okay, that's the purpose why we're here. Let me ask you, and please help me with the chat, right? In the chat. It's an approach drill. Mobile phones, which approach would you use? Demand, supply, or number of suppliers? Demand, pure demand. Yeah, exactly, right? So you can assume that people are ready to produce more cell phones, more mobile phones if you have more demand. So you just can start from like, okay, how many, and this is infrequent, right? Unless you buy more than one mobile phone per year. Normally, most people will be buying them infrequently, okay? And then how many they buy per year, which can be a fraction, right? So you can start with like, okay, I buy a mobile phone every 3 years, so 1/3, right, times the number of people who have phones, not 100% population. Never 100% of the population has something, right? Almost never. So consider that. And then the price, for instance. Now, the next one is COVID vaccines at the beginning of the pandemic. What approach? Everybody in the chat, supply. Yes, I agree, right? Pure supply at full capacity even, right? Here you could use 100%. You could say like, okay, there were like 3 to 4 types of vaccines. Let's assume each one had like 5, 6 factories, and they were 100% capacity utilization, etc., etc. Okay. And finally, how many, so the market size of cinemas in your city, right? What is the number of people who goes to cinemas in your city? Which approach would you use? Mixed. No, I think you can use an adjusted supply here, right? You could start with the people going to cinemas, but you can also, if you can have an educated guess of how many cinemas are there in your city, you can just calculate how many people can they take at 100% capacity, and then adjust that. Well, when I go to the cinema, I see half of the seats empty, especially after the pandemic, right? So I guess it's 50% capacity utilization. Then you can do a good estimation from the supply side, okay, the capacity. But you can, of course, you can choose the approach that you feel more confident about. You can make better assumptions about. That's the key. Find an approach where you are more confident in the assumptions. All right, very good. Yeah, here the question was, what is the market size of cinemas in your city in terms of number of visitors, number of tickets? Okay, any questions? Let me stop here for questions. Please do share in the chat or raise your hand. I can't really believe there's no question at all. So maybe you're a little bit shy or waking up, depending on where you are. But please don't hesitate, okay? I'll not stop here to avoid wasting time, but please do share any questions. Sometimes your question is exactly what someone else wants to know, okay? By the way, I always like to connect to my students and my candidates. So I'm sharing my LinkedIn here with you in the chat for that. Okay, let's continue. I have here the approach of the sofa market size in France. Okay, let's talk about it. What approach would you use for sofa market size? What you just learned. Demand, supply, or number of suppliers. Demand. Okay, so now you are getting there. Great. It's much harder to use the supply approach because then you would have to estimate how many factories, sofa factories, are there in France and the ones that import into France. So it's super hard. Therefore, we go for the population consumption, right? But if I tell you like how many sofas can one factory produce, then of course you go for the supply approach. Okay, how many sofas, 100% capacity utilization, then you adjust to something lower. Finally, structuring, right? So as I said, a lot of candidates, they jump into structuring right away. They skip the steps. They are prone to making mistakes because they did not think about the depth of the estimation, think about the clarification of the information to make sure you're doing the right thing. Didn't think about the approach, and this can be very dangerous, okay? You don't want to play by ear. You don't want to improvise in a case interview, okay? It can work. Sometimes you do an estimation, you're lucky, you just get everything right, even without clarifying, without thinking hard about the approach. But you don't want to need to get lucky, right? You want to be able to be methodical and crack every single one. This requires, as I said, method. Now, it is important to structure your estimation logically using breakdowns, okay, and then present structurally. Here, we are talking about a market size of infrequent consumption. Again, unless you buy more than once per year. But we know that this is not the case for most people. Let's take 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes to structure this. Okay, please use paper or your computer, whatever you prefer. Think about the breakdowns that you would use to estimate the sofa market size in France. Okay, we're talking 2.5 minutes from here. All right, that's 2.5 minutes. Normally, this is the maximum that you will have in an interview. Okay, so that's why you have to practice and get as a second nature this skill, how to structure. But let's see, do I have an excited volunteer who wants to share an approach? Raise your hand if you want to get some feedback. Again, this is an opportunity. It's not a must. And it can help you get real feedback. Yes, Johannes, please. Let's do it. You can unmute and go. Yeah, please.
I'll give it a try. Okay, so to estimate the total sofa market size in Europe per year, I first split it into cost per sofa
Okay.
and number of sofas per year.
Okay. Okay.
And cost per sofas, I split in three parts: luxury sofa, normal sofa, cheap sofa.
Which luxury? Luxury, normal, and cheap. Okay.
Yes, and then I assumed, I'm not sure if you want to hear this already. I assumed like 10% is luxury sofa. You want me to include this already, or
We'll get to the numbers later.
okay, just the approach. And then on the lower part, number of sofas. I split that into people buying sofas and sofas per year.
Sofa per person per year. Or what?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. And the sofa per person per year, I also split into three: frequent buyer, normal buyer, and no buyer.
Okay. Normal and no. Let's put no like that. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Johannes. First of all, congratulations for jumping in and volunteering, because this is an important instinct of consultants, right? Consultants are not afraid of exposure. They are not afraid of stepping up and giving their best answer, because that's what the profession requires, right? It's as if like you were, it's a little bit like acting, right? You don't want an actor that does not like exposure. So you do need to be courageous to jump on opportunities and give your best shot, okay? Of course, in front of the clients, you have to be more careful, but with your team, for sure, not. All right, thank you so much, Johannes. I can see here you use a typical quantitative breakdown, right? So here, the cost or price, and then the volume, and this gives you the euro market size, right? That's what we spoke about, annual. And that's definitely the way to go. Okay, so I do recommend you to do that. Now I have some words to say about breakdowns, segmentations. Okay, I will show you a suggested answer and then we'll comment on that. Okay, but I can tell you that you can go a bit deeper in your estimation, right? You can break down a little bit like, okay, how are you going to calculate the price? So probably here you need the volume of each one and the price of each one, right? And then you're going to have a weighted average, right? That you're going to use as an average cost or average price. Okay, same thing here, that you're going to use the same logic. Okay, it's good to explain more in detail what is your exact plan. Thank you again. Now, let's take a look at some additional suggestions here. So number of sofas sold per year times the average price of sofa. And now let me teach you an important concept, which is called the replacement concept. Okay? Here, we can use the following trick. It's easier to think about, for infrequent consumption, it's easier to think about the total number of existing items and their average timeline to find out how many items are sold per year. For instance, pick Germany, right? There are perhaps 40 million cars in Germany, right? It's roughly like one every two people. And you can estimate like how long does it take for a car to leave the fleet, right? Maybe 10 years. Let's say 10 years, the car leaves, it's sold to a different country, or it is completely useless. Now, then we just need to estimate now how many cars have to be sold to maintain that fleet constant per year. I think you can do this math, right? 40 million. If every year I have, let's say if every 10 years I have to replenish the whole fleet of 40 million, right? Every year I'm replenishing 4 million, okay? So we need to sell 4 million cars per year in Germany just to maintain the population of cars constant. That's considering no growth. If we consider growth, then we have to apply that on the top, okay? So about the sofas, what is the total number of sofas? And what is the average sofa lifespan? And the total number of sofas, you can break it down in many different ways. But since we're focusing on residential sofas, we can talk about households. times the sofas per household. Now, something is missing here. And I want to pick your brains. What is missing in this particular? What is the box that is missing here for this to be correct? People, no, I don't need the people per house. For the number of households, yes, I need to calculate the people per house and the population, but the value, no, because here it's just the total number of sofas. Let's see if someone gets it. Frequency of purchase, no,
I
this is
think
already
it's about,
considered.
I mean, not all households will have a sofa.
Yeah, that's it, Julia. Exactly. Very good. Sorry if I didn't see your hand raised, but that's exactly it, right? So as I said before, nothing is 100%. There are people who don't have sofas. They don't, right? So you have to consider the sofa penetration rate. Now, if you are already considering here that some people don't have sofas, so in your average, it's already embedded, then you don't need this box, okay? But here we are assuming, I would tell my interviewer, like I'm assuming houses that have sofa, how many sofas on average per house? Because it's easier for me to estimate that, right? Because of I know my friends have sofas and so on, so I can think about out of the whole all houses with sofas, how many sofas they have, plus a penetration rate, because it's never going to be 100%. Okay. And the household, the population divided by the average number of people per household. And here I break down into small households and large households. Okay, that's a segmentation. Flavio, when should I segment and how much should I segment? Well, only segment things that when you believe there is a substantial difference between segments so that it's worth the effort. Because, for instance, if you say like people who drink water, people who drink a lot of water and not so much water, but in the end of the day, people have to drink water, right? So they have to drink at least, I don't know, 2 liters. Maybe people who drink a lot drink 3 liters, right? 2 to 3 liters. Is it worth segmenting that? Maybe not, right? It's gonna give you trouble in calculating it, or maybe a segment is very small. Let's say trips, right? Business class, economy class, first class. First class is so small, like a tiny percentage, right? Almost no planes have first class. Would you really like to segment into, like, would you get into this trouble, right? You're creating work for yourself. So only segment if you feel that the items are different enough, right? Let's say smokers, casual smokers and heavy smokers. Yes, maybe yes. There's some people who smoke weekends and so on, 1-2 cigarettes, and then some people smoke a pack every day, right? That's a very big difference. Okay, that's worth it. Use your judgment here. Then growth, as I said, we add that on top. So here we could do the total number of sofas times a percentage growth rate. Maybe the population of France is growing, right? 1-2%, and then we can add 1 or 2% of sofas on top of that, assuming that this is a constant relationship between people and sofas. And the average price, again, segment if it makes sense, like premium sofas, standard sofas, yes, there is a substantial difference of price. And here, as I said before, like it's a weighted average. Okay. Everything clear? Any questions or comments? Yes, Johannes.
When you estimate the sofas per household, and you have sofas per household, small household, and sofas per household, large household, don't you have to do the one step further number of sofas times share as well to get the weighted average? Or how would the calculation for this?
Yeah, here you're talking about here, right? Up here.
Yes, yes.
Right. Yes, we would have to get the percentage as well. You're right.
So like how you in the way you did it for the standard sofa.
Exactly. In the way I did it here as well.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly. Perfect. Very good.
Even I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the initial 2.5 minutes that you gave us, I actually started it the other way around. I started with the population of France, divided it into rural, urban, and then calculated the number of households.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the way you're branching out is how I started, and then I tried to narrow it down to the number of sofas sold per year into the average price. Is
Mhm.
that a correct way to go about, or do we need to like start with the number of sofas into the price?
Okay, good question. Look, everything we show here is not exact science, right? This is not exact science, it's not math. There is no one single path to the answer, right? Everything we show at Highbridge also, we also call suggested structure, because there are no such a thing as wrong or right. It's more like weak and strong structures, or organized and disorganized, right? So we try to show you strong, organized structures so that you get inspiration. But I always tell the best candidates, they don't try to just memorize what they see. It's not about a library of mental frameworks. That's not the case. The best candidates, they get a way of thinking about the problem. They always actively trying to solve themselves, however they want to do it. And then they learn with the suggested answer how to incorporate certain tricks and parts and techniques into their own methods, right? That's how they learn. That's how they keep being a critical thinker, not a memorizer, because memorizer, they are easily spotted by the interviewers, right? As long as you throw an oddball, they kind of try to shoot a memorized framework that doesn't work, then you see it, okay?
Yeah,
That
got
said, if you get to the answer in a organized way and it makes sense and it's clear, that's absolutely acceptable, right? There's no such a thing as you have to start from here, right? I like to start from here, every market size, because it's logical, right? Price versus volume, and then you have the households in the volume part. But again, there are multiple ways to do it.
Sure, got it. Thank you.
No problem. JK, you raise your hand.
Should we, at the beginning, should we ask the depth that we should be going to, or like the time that they would prefer to be allocated to the estimation? Because this is
yeah, not really. I would say that's interesting question. I wouldn't say that. I would say like use your judgment. If it's a full case, starts with a question, you can take 2-3 minutes, max 2.5 minutes. And if it's not, if it's like a discussion, it's like, oh, okay, let me estimate here. Then try to do it in a fast, cheap and dirty way, right? 2-3 levels maximum. Okay.
Can I answer the second question? Sorry.
Yes.
Should you show this decision split like in the second column, or can you just say, actually, I'm going to estimate number of sofas, and then I'm going to estimate the average price? So
yeah, you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, you can do it. That's fine. Again, it's a different, slightly different way to communicate. That's fine.
Thanks.
Now, Anusha, I will answer your question in the next slides. Let me get one more question. Actually, Johannes and Ibrahim, can you actually type up your question? I'll get them in a second, okay? Because we only have 15 minutes left and I want to finish the content. Just type up your question, please. All right. Step number 5 of 6 are the assumptions. Here, we're going to ask the interviewer for numbers to plug them in. But if not available, then you have to make assumptions yourself, right? Don't assume that there's no number. Ask the interviewer, like, here's my approach, blah, 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 blah. Don't touch numbers, right? It's pure structuring. Then you ask, do you have the numbers for me? No. Okay, then I will assume, okay? It's very silly to start assuming numbers and then the interviewer says like, no, I have the numbers for you. And that's awkward, okay? So please confirm, do you have the numbers or do you need me to assume? And now the tricks. Every assumption you make has to be quick, but plausible, all right? And they are testing here business acumen. How much attention do you pay to the real numbers around you? Because it matters, right? Consultants, they are dealing with orders of magnitude, size, importance, relative importance, speed, and so on, right? So if you say that it takes 30 minutes to make a Big Mac, it's because you never paid attention, right? You never, it doesn't mean that you go to McDonald's a lot, but like it's really 1 minute, 2 minutes, right? It's completely wrong magnitude to say 30 minutes to make a Big Mac, right? So you have to make educated guesses. And the main problems I see here are numbers that are way off, right? Completely off. It's just like never pays attention to numbers, right? Then, for instance, if I ask you, what is the valuation of Apple? What is the market value of Apple? And then you say something in the order of millions of dollars, right? You're off by a factor of a billion. So that's way off. It means that when you read the news, when you get information, you don't care about those numbers, like you don't read the news at all, right? So you have to have an idea, not memorize the numbers, but an idea of the sizes, like what is the population of like India, right? What is the population of the US and so on. Those numbers, like you need to know more or less what is the case. Okay. Wait, something weird happened on my screen. Can you still see me? Yeah, okay. Second problem, no rationale, right? So you cannot defend your number if you're asked a bit more about it, right? So it's like, oh, why did you say that? And you can use anchors. You can just, okay, I know that the population of my country, I'm in the UK, 60 million. I know the US is at least 3 times, if not 5 times bigger than, let's say, 250, 300 million, right? A rationale. Third pitfall, not being confident, right? Spending too much time trying to guess one little number. And you don't have this time. You cannot just like, spend 1 minute thinking about a number. Is it that? Is it that? No, you have to shoot, right? You have to shoot fast, and that's it. Okay. So let's take a look at the numbers that I put here for you on the screen. Those are just assumptions, okay? They are not real necessarily, but they give you a direction. France population, sofas per household, and blah, blah, blah. And then you have, so the yellow ones, the orange ones are assumptions. The green ones are calculations, right? You don't have to make assumptions for everything, only the end of your tree, right? Normally the last level. Okay. Here there is a mistake. Sorry, my team said that I have to correct that and I forgot. So this number is wrong. Anyway, don't worry about that. Like that's just, now it's all about picking numbers that are easy for you, right? And I really like when candidates use fractions instead of percentages, right? Because fractions, they allow you to make calculations fast, like 1/3, 1/4, leave it like that. Because if you have more fractions in your tree, you can, and remember how to multiply and add fractions, right? You can do that better than with percentages, right? 33% times 80% is much harder to calculate than 1/3 times 4/5. Okay, very good. Then let me just finish and I'll get to questions. Math and reality check. So once you make your assumptions, you can ask, either you do it on the go, you can assume and calculate, that's fine. Do it stepwise. Or you ask for time and you do the whole calculation, double check your numbers, and then announce the results, okay? And here they're looking for the right order of magnitude, right? That you get to the number, that you don't make silly math mistakes, you don't make mistakes with zeros and things like that, right? Those are definitely big red flags. Okay, so today we did a infrequent market size, right, for sofas. We went through the understand the depth, listen and clarify, brainstorm, define the approach, structure, assumptions, and math and reality check. Let me get the questions now. You can raise your hand. Let's see here. Regarding the sofa penetration rate, you said something about using judgment. How can you be sure that your judgment is or close to being correct? You cannot be sure because you cannot Google things during the interview, right? You have to use your best guess. And the thing is, over time, you calibrate yourselves, because if you are paying attention to things, practicing cases and so on, every time you finish a case, you do an estimation, go and Google the right numbers and the right assumptions so that you calibrate you a little bit more, right? This is the way to do it.
Good evening. First of all, thanks for the session. It was amazing. My doubt is not related to the question in hand per se. It's more generic. I hope that's fine.
Yeah, absolutely. Garji, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So it's like while we're in an interview, and let's say midway through our process, we realize that, oh, we are now coming up with a different approach, or we are looking forward to some. Is that actually suggested to change your approach midway, or like just continue through whatever you were doing originally? Because in consulting, it usually happens because we have multiple approaches. That is a dilemma that's always there.
Okay, there's not a lot of room for you to start things from scratch in an interview. So if you are trained, this shouldn't happen often at all. I don't see it happening, right? So if you practice and you know what kind of problem you're solving, the structures that you want to do, and so on, you may be corrected by your interviewer sometimes, like, oh, have you thought about this? And it's like, oh, yeah, that's true. You can add and complement your approach, but I wouldn't say change completely. And in the middle, say like, ooh, I got everything wrong. Let me restart, right? This doesn't happen when the interview is going well. Okay,
Right.
but in work, yes, I agree, like totally, right? In work, for sure, you change your approach, you have time to think, get feedback, etc. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Gaji. Could you give us some good reflexes priorities in the math part, or tricks to break down the numbers and calculate faster? Well, Devime, I would say the best here is to practice arithmetics and algebra, things that you did in school. So there's no, let's say, there's a lot of little tricks that you can do in math, right? I cannot go through them here as much as I would like to. That's like inside Hybrid, we do have a math course exactly for that. So we go back to the basics, fractions and percentages and probabilities. We calculate. But my takeaway here for you is don't pick numbers that make your life difficult, right? Pick round numbers, pick fractions and stuff, and this will be much better. Okay. Could you share this presentation with us? I think my team usually publishes the recording after this. If you're registered, you should receive it. Okay. How would you suggest justifying a figure you haven't faced before? You've never Googled about sulfur penetration based on experience. Yeah, you have to be confident and use your best judgment and just do it. Use a proxy or something that you know, right? For instance, maybe you are calculating the number of motorbikes, but you know more or less the number of cars. And because you know, like, oh, in my country, there are 1 car for every 2 people. Then motorbikes, when I go to the street, I see for every 10 cars, I see 1 or 2 motorcycles. So let's use 20% of that number, right? So try to resort to your own experiences and memories.
Sorry, that was my question. So would it be justifiable just to say within my close friends and families?
Yes, but you have to assume, but you have to like, oh, but I'm not average. And then are you not average because of what, right? Maybe you are in the top tier of income or middle tier. Then you have to kind of like show that you're not in a bubble, right? You can adjust your own experience. Okay?
Thank you.
Maybe you're connected to people who travel a lot, but not necessarily the population travels as much as your friends, right? For several reasons. That's it, folks. Stay curious. Thank you for coming today. I hope you enjoyed.